Hey everyone! So I was having this random conversation with my friends last week about ketchup. You know how weird conversations get sometimes. And I realized none of us actually knew what the heck we were squirting on our fries every day. Like, we're literally consuming bottles of this red stuff without knowing anything about it. So naturally, I went down this massive rabbit hole, researching everything about ketchup. And oh my god, you guys, the stuff I found out is actually mind-blowing. Did you know that what we call ketchup today used to be made from fish? Or that there's this whole psychological thing about why we're literally addicted to it? Today, I'm spilling all the tea on ketchup, what it actually is, how it took over the world, and some seriously wild statistics that'll make you look at that bottle differently. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll have the coolest ketchup facts to drop at your next dinner party. But first, let me blow your mind with this. Americans alone consume about 10 billion ounces of ketchup every year. That's literally 3 bottles per person per year. And get this, kids under 13 eat 50% more ketchup than any other age group. So if you're wondering why your little cousin drowns everything in ketchup, there's actually science behind it. Okay, so what is ketchup exactly? Most of us think it's just tomatoes in a bottle, but it's way more complex than that. Modern ketchup is basically a sweet and sour condiment made from tomatoes, sugar, vinegar, and a bunch of spices. But here's the crazy part. Original ketchup had nothing to do with tomatoes. The word ketchup actually comes from the Chinese word ketchup, which was a fermented fish sauce. I know, gross, right? When British traders brought this concept back in the 1600s, they started experimenting with local ingredients. People were making ketchup from mushrooms, oysters, mussels, even walnuts and grapes. It wasn't until the 1800s that Americans started using tomatoes. And even then, people were skeptical because tomatoes were considered poisonous by the wealthy. Plot twist, they weren't wrong to be worried. But it wasn't the tomatoes' fault. It was the lead in their fancy pewter plates that was making them sick. So what's actually in that bottle you're obsessed with? Modern tomato ketchup is surprisingly simple but scientifically crafted. You've got tomatoes as the base, obviously, but then there's sugar, vinegar, salt, and this whole blend of spices that varies by brand. The typical spice mix includes onions, allspice, coriander, cloves, cumin, garlic, and mustard. Some brands throw in celery, cinnamon, or ginger. But here's what's wild. The exact recipe is what makes or breaks a ketchup brand. Heinz, which dominates 60% of the US market, and 82% of the UK market, has their formula locked down tighter than Fort Knox. The magic is in the balance. Ketchup hits what food scientists call the bliss point. That perfect combination of sweet, salty, sour, and umami that literally triggers pleasure centers in our brains. No wonder we're addicted. This is where the story gets really juicy. Henry J. Heinz revolutionized ketchup in 1876. Not just with his recipe, but with his marketing genius. He put ketchup in clear glass bottles so people could see the product. Revolutionary at a time when most condiments came in opaque containers that could hide sketchy ingredients. But the real game changer? McDonald's. When they started serving ketchup packets with their fries in the 1960s, they basically trained entire generations to associate ketchup with fast food. Think about it, how many of us learned to eat ketchup because of Happy Meals? The global expansion has been insane. Canada jumped on the ketchup train in 1881, and they're almost as obsessed as Americans. But here's what's fascinating. Ketchup consumption varies wildly by culture. Europeans tend to use it more sparingly, while in some Asian countries, they've created sweet ketchup variants that would blow your mind. All right, let's talk data because this stuff is fascinating. The global ketchup market is absolutely massive. We're talking 14 billion in 2024. And analysts predict it'll hit nearly $22 billion by 2029. That's a compound annual growth rate of about 4%, which means ketchup is literally growing faster than many tech stocks. Here's what's really interesting about who's consuming ketchup. Age demographics. Kids under 13 are the heavy hitters. They consume 50% more ketchup than any other age group. But it's not just kids being kids. There's actually psychological reasoning here. Young taste buds are more sensitive to bitter flavors, so the sweetness in ketchup helps mask any bitter notes in foods. As we age, our taste preferences become more complex, and we tend to use less ketchup. Regional breakdown. Americans are the undisputed ketchup champions. consuming about 3 bottles per person annually. Canadians are close behind. But Europe is interesting. They consume ketchup, but in much smaller quantities, and often prefer more sophisticated condiments. In Asia, particularly in countries like the Philippines and Malaysia, they've developed their own sweet ketchup variants, often made with bananas instead of tomatoes. Mind blown, right? Gender patterns. While specific gender data on ketchup consumption is limited, studies on condiment preferences show that women tend to be more adventurous with different sauce varieties, while men often stick to classics like ketchup and mustard. Though honestly, I think this is more about cultural conditioning than actual taste preferences. Here's where it gets really nerdy. But stick with me, because this explains so much about why we're all ketchup addicts. Ketchup is basically designed to be irresistible. It hits multiple taste receptors simultaneously: sweet from the sugar, sour from the vinegar, salty from the salt, and umami from the tomatoes. This combination creates what food scientists call sensory-specific satiety. Basically, your brain doesn't get tired of the flavor as quickly as it would with simpler tastes. That's why you can keep dipping fry after fry without getting sick of it. There's also this thing called flavor bridging. Ketchup's complex flavor profile makes it compatible with a huge range of foods. It can complement the saltiness of fries, balance the richness of a burger, or add complexity to plain eggs. It's like the ultimate wingman of condiments. This is probably my favorite part, because ketchup is definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation globally. In the US, we're pretty straightforward. Tomato ketchup, maybe some organic or low-sugar variants. But around the world, ketchup gets wild. In the Philippines, they have banana ketchup, which was invented during World War II when tomatoes were scarce. It's sweeter and often dyed red to look like tomato ketchup. In the UK, they have brown sauce that competes directly with ketchup, and there are passionate debates about which is superior. What's really interesting is how different cultures perceive ketchup quality. Americans tend to prefer sweeter ketchup, while Europeans often prefer versions with more vinegar and less sugar. It's the same basic concept, but completely different flavor profiles. Let's talk business for a hot second, because the ketchup industry is actually cutthroat. Heinz is the absolute king. They control 60% of the US market and 82% of the UK market. But they're not sleeping on their success. They're constantly innovating with organic versions, reduced sugar options, and even different packaging. Their main competitors include Conagra brands, Unilever, Nestlé, and Del Monte. But here's what's interesting. Despite all this competition, most people are incredibly brand loyal when it comes to ketchup. Like scary loyal. There are people who will literally not eat ketchup if it's not their preferred brand. The market is also evolving with health consciousness. Sales of organic and low-sugar ketchups are growing at about 6 to 8% annually, which is faster than traditional ketchup growth. People want their ketchup fix, but with less guilt. So how exactly are we consuming all this ketchup? Obviously, fries are the #1 vehicle. I mean, is there any other way to eat McDonald's fries? But ketchup consumption patterns are actually changing. Younger generations are more experimental. They're putting ketchup on pizza, mixing it into mac and cheese, using it as a base for homemade sauces. Meanwhile, older generations tend to stick to traditional uses: burgers, hot dogs, fries. There's also this interesting trend where people are becoming more conscious about ingredients. The demand for organic, non-GMO, and reduced sugar ketchups is growing, especially among millennials and Gen Z. We want our comfort food, but we want to feel better about it. Restaurant usage is huge, too. Fast food chains go through millions of packets annually, and each chain has their preferred supplier. Some restaurants even make their own house ketchup to differentiate themselves. So there you have it. Ketchup is way more complex and fascinating than any of us realized. From its fishy origins, to its global domination, from the science of the bliss point, to the cultural variations around the world, ketchup is honestly one of the most successful food products in human history. Next time you're squirting that red gold on your fries, remember, you're participating in a global phenomenon worth billions of dollars, engineered by food scientists, and enjoyed by millions of people who are just as addicted as you are. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this deep dive, and I'll see you in the next video, where we're getting into the nitty-gritty of ketchup and your health. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.